The second injury is a sprained wrist. So he did the injury when the ball hit his hand in an awkward position whilst he was playing as a goalkeeper, obviously in football. So the aim of this stage is to re-establish 360 degrees movement in 3 weeks. The thing I would do to start with is to start with literally just moving his hand in an up and down motion. This is just to begin to get the movement back. If he's okay with this, I'll get him to write his name without a pen in big letters in the air. If I did it without a pen, the reason I say big letters, so he's having to like move his whole wrist into different positions, so like up, down, and side to side. Then I'll make him do it with a pen on a large board, so again with big letters, just so he has a tiny bit of resistance now. So he can begin to like move his wrist with a little bit of resistance without any pain in a 360 degrees motion. After the stage is complete, I'd refer him to a strengthening and conditioning coach in order to begin to strengthen the wrist up again. I would also recommend him to a physiotherapist to begin to get rid of the scar tissue. This is just so that the wrist recovers properly. Because with the scar tissue, it will recover quite weak. So by doing it this way, it will recover in a strong way. So the strength and coordination exercises. I want him. So the aim to start with is for the ankle, it's meant to say wrist, to be back to its maximum strength within 4 weeks. So I'm going to get him to do power ball exercises. This is just a ball which you can hold in your hand. It's about the size of a tennis ball, and it adds resistance to the opposite direction of wherever you move it. So by getting him to move it up, obviously the resistance would be downwards, so just adding more resistance to the injured wrist. So this just begins to add more resistance, and it will start to strengthen it up again. He could also use a resistance band to move up and down and side to side. This is quite good to use a resistant band as an alternative because obviously they're quite cheap, and you can control the amount of resistance you have, because you can obviously have the least amount of resistance by holding it right at the top of the resistant band, and then something at the bottom to hold it down. But you could also have the resistant band tighter, so there's more resistance on the wrist, so that's just quite a good one to have as an alternative. But the Powerball is the best one because it's literally it's made just to strengthen wrists in general, so something that would be really good for the wrist to recover for. So for his return to sport, I'm going to use progressive exercises. So just using a football to start with, you're just going to start by throwing the ball underarm to a partner, and then the reason I'm doing underarm is because it's probably the easiest way to throw a ball, but he's not going to catch any yet. I'm just going to say that now because that's impact, so we're doing that next. He's literally going to throw it, get another ball, throw that again, so we're just throwing for now. Then he's going to do an overarm throw because this puts a bit more stress on the wrist because he's having to put a bit more power on the throw. Just building it up now, and then he's going to do throwing and catching the ball. Just going to start basic without much power, and I'm going to get him to build up the power so he's getting more impact on the injured wrist. This means he's just going to get stronger as time goes on, and I'm going to get him to do different angles of catching. This just because if he does it, say with the W shape, so he catches the ball with both hands, obviously like this, he's going to obviously have quite a lot of strain on his wrist. It's going to go back like this, but I'm also going to get him to catch it above his head, to the side, and he's going to take a few into his body. He's going to do like a long barrier technique on a few, just so he can get used to all ways of catching the ball. So that's why I've said different angles of catching or stopping the ball. and different amounts of power as well. But then, because obviously at the moment we're just doing catching, and as a goalkeeper you're not always just going to catch the ball, you might have to like hit it away. I'm going to get him to start to hit the ball away with his hands. Obviously it's more strain on the wrist. This is going to be doing from starting basic, not much power, just to the side of him, and he's going to parry the ball away to the side. This is just to start to replicate his in-game movements, or making saves. And then I'm going to, after he's okay with that, I'm going to do some corners coming in, and he's going to have to punch it away. And obviously this is going to probably be like the highest amount of resistance he's going to have on his hand, or on his wrist, sorry. So this is a good one because it's literally testing the maximum he's probably going to do. Because he's having to really like force that ball away to get the ball out of the box, so it's good to start doing it now so he doesn't aggravate it actually in the game. Then I'm going to finally get him to start diving and saving as he usually would from different angles of shot, so making him dive to his left, to his right, high, low, everything, so he's really getting used to those in-game movements now, so he's ready to return to football, so he doesn't injure himself. So some of the psychological considerations there are, or if he doesn't know if he'll return to the same standard. So for example, if his wrist is badly injured, he may not be able to do the same things as he should, as he could do, and he might be nervous going back, because if he goes back and he knows his wrist isn't right, he may not return to the same standard because he might be very nervous, so he might make several mistakes because he's too busy thinking about his wrist and if it's going to get injured or not. Another thing he might happen is if he'll get frustrated with how long the recovery is taking. This is just because every footballer wants to play as much football as they can, really, and so by him not being able to play, he's going to get very frustrated. So I'm going to have to make sure that he doesn't go back too early because he's too frustrated. So this is important, so he doesn't go back too early and injure himself even worse. He's going to need a lot of motivation to stay focused on the recovery and not go back too early. Meant to be 2 O's and 2, but oh well. This is just so, if he's motivated to really stay on the recovery program, then that means that he'll stick to it so he can get back to his maximum ability. So this is really important. I'll probably motivate him by showing him clips of when he isn't injured, and I'll tell him, if you go back too early, you will get injured again. So he'll really stay motivated to stay on the recovery program, and he'll get back to his same strength, hopefully. So the last one is goal setting. I'm going to use long-term, medium, short-term goals, because if I just set a long-term goal, he's going to think in his head, psychologically, that's quite a big task, so he's going to think, it's unrealistic, and he might lose motivation. But by using short-term goals and medium-term goals, he might think it's more realistic because he can't build up to it instead of one massive task to achieve. So yeah, this is really good to use for goal setting because he'll just keep the motivation going, which I think is really important in the psychological considerations. So the need for a carefully structured rehabilitation is really important, because if I push him too hard too early, he will probably aggravate his injury again. Could do it even worse and be out of football for even longer, which is the last thing we want. So I'm going to have to make sure that the program is structured correctly, so it's gradually building up, and he hasn't got chucked into the deep end, and he won't have to do anything he's not comfortable with doing. And this leads on to the next point. If he's not sure in his head psychologically that he's ready to do any of the tasks, he probably won't put 100% effort in, which means that then if he goes to an in-game situation, he puts 100% effort in, he probably will injure himself again. So it's really important that he's psychologically thinking, okay, I'm going to put all my effort in, which means that he won't get injured in the in game due to him going back too early. So yeah, this bit's really important as well. Finally, for the recording documentation, tracking treatment, I'm just going to keep on making sure I have up-to-date information on my client in a folder so I can always be aware of any problems that occur. For example, if 1 week I need to strap his wrist and he's allergic to zinc oxide tape, I need to know this so I know not to use it so I don't give him an allergic reaction, because I want to give him a good treatment so he can obviously get back to his football without any other problems, for example, like allergic reaction. To track his treatment, I'm going to use smart targets, just because smart targets are measurable, which means I can see where he's at in his process. I'll probably use short-term, medium-term and long-term goals again for this, just so I always know where he is on his journey to the long-term goal of returning to his football at his maximum strengths. Any questions, I'd be happy to take them.